In 2019, a massive container ship called the Northern Meridian lost 83 containers during a violent storm off the coast of Portugal. The shipping company called it a tragic accident and filed a $14 million insurance claim. The story made the news for 2 days, and then everyone forgot about it. Everyone except Marco Delgado and Tyler Harmon. Because 3 weeks after those containers sank, Marco and Tyler started hearing rumors that changed everything. What they eventually discovered 200 feet below the surface was something never meant to be found, and it didn't make them rich. It put them in the crosshairs of one of the most dangerous criminal networks in Europe. Marco and Tyler worked aboard the Northern Meridian as maintenance divers. Their job was inspecting the hull and clearing debris from the propellers. They weren't deep-sea salvage experts. They were working divers who happened to love what they did. The night the containers went overboard, the storm came in faster than anyone predicted. Within 20 minutes, waves went from manageable to monstrous. The ship listed hard to port, and then came a sound no crew member would ever forget, the scream of metal tearing loose. 83 containers broke free. Some crushed other containers on deck. Some tumbled into black water. By the time the storm passed, nearly a third of the cargo was gone. Marco and Tyler assumed the company would send a salvage team, insurance would pay out, and life would move on. They were wrong about every part of that. 48 hours later, Captain Anderson pulled them aside. His face was gray. "We've been contacted by someone claiming to own container NRMD 4471, he said. He says recovery is non-negotiable. He wants coordinates, depth readings, and current patterns. Now." The captain didn't know who the man was, but the company's head office had forwarded his messages directly, which meant someone high up was taking him very seriously. Over the next week, the messages escalated into open threats. The captain reported them. The company told him to ignore it, but the threats didn't stop, and the crew started talking. A container so important that someone was threatening an entire crew to get it back. Theories ranged from gold to weapons to classified equipment. Tyler didn't care about rumors, he cared about facts, so he pulled the cargo manifest. Container NRMD 4471 was registered to a company called Aegis Maritime Solutions based in Cyprus. Declared contents: industrial water purification equipment. Insurance value $340,000. Tyler showed Marco that night. Marco read it and laughed. Someone's threatening to destroy careers over a water filter? Or the manifest is lying, Tyler said. They both knew what came next. They also both knew it was a terrible idea. They didn't rush it. That decision probably saved their lives. The ship docked in Hamburg. Marco and Tyler took leave and spent 4 months preparing. They trained for deep-water technical diving in Norway, logging over 30 supervised dives below 50 meters. They learned trimix breathing protocols until they could recite them in their sleep. Most importantly, they built a team. Elena Voss, a marine biologist with sonar equipment. Danny Tsai, a former Coast Guard rescue diver with over 1,000 deep-water dives. And Sam and Kira, a married couple who ran a charter diving operation out of Lisbon. Marco was honest with everyone. Suspicious container. Unknown threats, no guarantees. But one rule: if anything illegal was inside, they'd call the authorities immediately. Danny almost walked away. Then he called back 2 days later with one condition. They'd carry a satellite phone, and if anything felt wrong, they'd surface and make the call. Everyone agreed. They launched from Nazaré on a Tuesday morning in March. Elena's sonar found the container cluster within 2 hours, sitting on a sandy shelf at 58 meters. She counted 14 containers on the screen. Then she frowned. "One of them is giving off a signal," she said. "Low-frequency electronic pulse. Consistent interval." The boat went quiet. "Containers don't send signals," Tyler said. "Neither does water purification equipment," Marco replied. They marked the location. Marco and Tyler would dive first. But before anyone geared up, Sam called everyone to the stern. "We've got company." On the sonar, something large was circling 40 meters below them. Slow, steady, and too regular to be an animal. Elena studied it carefully. "That's not a shark. That's an underwater drone. Someone else is down there." Danny said they should leave immediately. Marco refused. "If we leave, whoever owns that thing takes the container, and we never find out what's inside." They watched the drone for 20 minutes. It completed 3 loops and moved away, disappearing off Elena's sonar range. "It's gone," she said, "but I don't know for how long." Marco looked at Tyler. "We go now. The cold hit them first. Even through dry suits, the water at 50 meters pressed the heat out of their bodies. Their dive lights cut white tunnels through blue-green darkness. The containers were scattered across the shelf, like building blocks dropped by a giant. Some upright, some sideways, two stacked at broken angles. Then they spotted it. One container sat apart from the rest, wrapped in heavy-gauge chains threaded through welded steel loops. The lock wasn't standard. It was a hardened disc lock used on high-security storage. And bolted to the roof was a small black box with a blinking red light. The signal. Tyler checked his computer. 18 minutes of bottom time. He went to work with industrial bolt cutters, snapping chains one by one while his hands shook from the cold. The disc lock wouldn't cut. He switched to a pry bar, braced his feet against the door, and pulled until the hasp snapped. They each grabbed a door handle. They pulled. The doors groaned open. Their lights hit the interior, and both divers went completely still. The container had been fitted out like a vault. Against the back wall sat the signal source, a waterproof hard drive array in a sealed titanium housing connected to a battery unit still operational. Green lights glowed through the murk. The rest of the space was filled with vacuum-sealed waterproof cases, stacked floor to ceiling on custom welded shelving. This wasn't standard shipping. Someone had engineered this container to protect its contents from the ocean. Tyler pulled out the first case and opened it. Inside, sealed in plastic sleeves, were paintings. Small, old, unmistakably original. Marco opened a second case. Bank records, transaction logs, account numbers, names, hundreds of pages of financial documentation. A third case, passports. Not 2 or 3, stacks of them. Different countries, different names, but many with the same photographs. Someone had dozens of identities. Marco's hands were trembling, and it wasn't from the cold. Tyler tapped his computer. 3 minutes left. They grabbed what they could. 1 case of documents, 2 passports, 1 case of paintings, closed the doors, and began their ascent. The decompression stops felt endless. Hanging at 6 meters in open water, clutching evidence of a massive criminal operation, knowing that drone could return any second. When they surfaced, Marco ripped off his mask and said 4 words. Call the police. Now. Portuguese maritime police arrived by nightfall. Interpol followed within the hour. And over the next 3 weeks, the full picture emerged. The hard drive held 4 terabytes of encrypted data. When cracked, it revealed a money laundering network spanning 14 countries that had moved an estimated $2.3 billion over a decade through shell companies and fake freight invoices. The paintings were 11 originals stolen from museums and private collections across Europe. Combined value, over $40 million. The passports belonged to 3 individuals already on Interpol's watch list, including a man named Victor Harvel, a Belgian shipping magnate who had built a legitimate empire as a front for the entire operation. Aegis Maritime Solutions was one of his shells. Victor had used container ships to move stolen art and financial records between ports for years. His containers were modified with waterproof housings and tracking beacons so they could be deliberately lost at sea and quietly recovered by private salvage teams. The insurance payouts were bonus income. The storm was real, but the lashing failure on NRMD 4471 was not. Investigators found the bolts had been deliberately weakened. And then came the twist that shook Marco to his core. Interpol traced encrypted messages between Victor and someone on the Northern Meridian's crew, a deck officer named Ray Cortez. Marco knew Ray. They'd shared meals, played cards, fixed a leak in Ray's cabin together. Ray had been paid 50,000 euros per job to ensure modified containers fell overboard during storms. He was arrested in Bilbao 3 weeks later. But Ray revealed one final detail during interrogation that made investigators go quiet. The underwater drone Elena detected hadn't been left over from a failed recovery. It was deployed that same morning. Victor's team was en route to the site while Marco and Tyler were underwater. If they had waited one more day, they would have found an empty container. Or worse, they would have met Victor's team 60 meters down with no one to help them. Victor Harvel was arrested in Antwerp 4 months later. 14 network members fell with him. Total assets seized, over $180 million. Marco and Tyler received an Interpol commendation and a whistleblower reward they split with their entire team. Tyler left shipping and opened a dive school in the Azores. Marco shifted to underwater archaeology. Danny never took a dive like that again. When asked why, he said, We were 12 hours from either finding nothing or not coming back. I don't like those odds. The Portuguese Navy recovered container NRMD 4471 2 months later. Inside were 23 more stolen artworks, $6.2 million in cash, and a second hard drive that led to 40 additional arrests. The container now sits in an evidence warehouse in Lisbon. Its tracking beacon was finally switched off after blinking on the ocean floor for 247 days.